where you, like, some of the topics or challenges that you hear from men, especially speaking about us women?
You're forcing us to be vulnerable. Men need to, you need to speak. You need to. And men speak. Majority of the presidents in the world are men. We know how to speak. A majority of authors are men. We know how to speak. We have words. But vulnerability is a whole other ballgame. So there's a difference between vulnerability and transparency. It's actually impossible for a man to be vulnerable with any other woman besides his wife. So my wife, out of any woman in this world, can destroy me. Which leads me back to the thing of vulnerability. Vulnerability is a military language for men. If you hear an army saying, we have a vulnerability, they have to close that vulnerability because they know the enemy is going to attack that vulnerability. And so when a man speaks of vulnerability, he's speaking of his most intimate part that could easily be used to destroy him. And so he gives that willingly to his wife. I give that willingly to my wife. My wife can take those vulnerabilities, know my limitations, know my weaknesses, and she can champion me in ways that no one else can. It's vulnerability is like if a man is a house, vulnerability is saying, or rather transparency is saying, look through the window. So right now I'm being transparent with you. Look through the window.
Not being vulnerable.
Vulnerable is saying, come into the house and touch the furniture. So whatever those wounds are, whatever that weakness is, I'm inviting you into the house to touch that.
I really like this distinction here. Right? When we say we want men to be more vulnerable, we want them to be more open, but I think sometimes we forget that we have basic differences in how we communicate, our styles of communication, and then the reasons why men feel or why they fear. Because I think sometimes when we speak of this, it's from a place of fear. We don't want to be hurt. We've been hurt before. And then we have this trauma response that we're not going to be vulnerable because so often we hear about it being turned around against us, being used against us and kind of thrown in our faces. And that level of hurt, that level of wound, that emotional wound is very hard for us to process. We can deal with the physical wounds, right? We've been taught that since we were boys. We can deal with that. A stiff of a lip, don't let me see you cry. We know how to deal with that. But that emotional wound, we very, very rarely have any sort of callous skin that protects us right there. So before we continue and do deeper dive into this one, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss new uploads. Still trying to do 2 a day. So back to this, the difference between transparency and vulnerability. Sometimes what men sort of settle for is that transparency, is that sense where I can tell you about things, but I don't let you in to those intimate details that can actually hurt me if they're used, if they're thrown back in my face, or if they're used again in another topic, another discussion, or just simply, again, just used to hurt. Because we're all trying to protect ourselves. We're all trying to protect, not one another. It would be great if we did that. It would be great if we took what was said into confidence and used and put aside in a box where that vulnerability allows us to grow closer. But we've become sort of conditioned to look at things catastrophically. If things blow up, if things go wrong, how can I protect myself or at the very least minimize the damage? So I agree in the sense that this vulnerability, this thing is almost for a man is sacred. If I'm going to allow that to happen, it's got to be with someone who I consider sacred. It's got to be someone that is that important to me. It's not something that we should be going around and making available to whomever we're simply just talking to or dating. And where as men we hear about it often that you should be vulnerable with the woman you're dating. But that is something that again has to be, you could think about it as something that should be earned, right? That after developing real trust with this person, you can do that. And I say that because yes, the rate of failures of marriages or just how we've kind of cultivated a society in which we put all this stuff online, and we're sort of expecting relationships to go left, to go sour, for the milk to go bad. So men have put up these shields, these walls, and said, and compartmentalized parts of their lives and said, if you want to know that about me or that thing that drives me, or that thing that hurts, that thing that keeps me up at night, you have to be important to me. You have to be. Where I think we go wrong as men is we desperately want to be important to someone. We desperately want someone to be important to us. So we sort of rush some of these processes, and we try to skip the phases, the vetting, the understanding of building that intimacy, building that trust, and opening up that vulnerability valve bit by bit. We're starved for it. So we do it in this deluge. And we do it in this deluge, and sometimes we do it the wrong people. And what comes back to sort of bite us. And then we'll take that wound and then extrapolate that to every single woman out there. And this is an obvious problem because it's very easy for us to identify this. When we're talking about women, we say, you paint with this broad brush and you have something go wrong with your life, and then it's every man. It's every man. Video after video, video essay after video essay. It's never something that says, no, it's the men I choose, the men I choose to date, the men I choose to live my life. No, we hear it as a broad brush. We understand that that's such a wrong thing to do. How it alienates the other men that simply hear it, and sort of cultivates this, leave them alone sort of attitude and behavior that we're seeing propagate more and more in the younger generation, and even up to the millennials. If that's how they feel, leave them alone. But you know, academically, that that's not the thing for every woman. In fact, you can probably name a handful of women in your own life that don't feel that way, have never espoused those sort of views, yet we walk with that sort of thing. So we men have to realize we do the very same thing. And we do it in the name of protection. I'm not going to open up to her ever because she's going to turn around and throw it in my face. But she's never really had those, if this person is important to you, this woman's important to you, and you've done the vetting and you've seen, no, she's never really done that. Right? She's never really done that. But you have this fear, this baggage that we're walking around with, that we're trying to protect ourselves with. So we give them almost nothing. Right? We give them almost nothing. I'm not going to open up to you about the things that bother me. I'm not even like this man said in this post about. I'm not even going to be transparent. Right? And then we wonder why the relationships fail when we don't look at ourselves and say, well, we didn't build these very real connections, so it's easy for people to leave. And I know I'm simplifying a lot of things, right? Of why relationships don't work or how what actually it takes to make them work. But if we don't identify where we go wrong in some of these things and why we do them, then we can't really be pointing the finger elsewhere. We don't see that. Yeah, I think transparency will be a great goal, right? Yeah, I can identify the things that hurt me as a child. I can identify the things where I went wrong in previous relationships and where I think would be a better partner today. But now letting, like you said, giving that example of letting you into the house to touch upon those wounds, those ones that are healed or not so healed, the ones that are not, currently scabbed over, is something that has to be reserved for someone that is of the highest importance to you. I think that makes sense. If it does to you, let me know down in the comments. If you see a video on your screen, take a look at those and let me know what you think about those as well. I'll see you in the next one.